Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Facebook, live on Nisim 95.9 and 100.1. Here, if it's not a fact, we don't discuss them. And tonight we are discussing a very, very thorny issue which is taking the nation by storm, which has to do with the issue of the E-Levy transaction. Parliament has been struggling to come to a consensus as the way forward with respect to the approval of this E-Levy, which was captured in the 2022 budget of the finance minister. If we are to customize back as to the issues that are pertained with respect to the E-Levy, there's been so much concern which has been raised by the minority in parliament. The finance minister also says that, look, we need to raise the money and we need to look internal for that money to be raised. The days when we'd have to go to the bond market, the days when we'd have to borrow from, other external bodies in order to build our own projects in this country, we ought to look inside the country for that money. And so that 1.75% E-Levy on all mobile money transactions is where we are looking to raise that money. And so the government intends to raise close to 7 billion Ghana cedis from that E-Levy. The minority has been raising concerns. The concern they are raising is that this has the potential of derailing all the gains that have been made as a nation when it comes to the drive towards an electronic economy, where people are already complaining about the 1% they have to pay when they are transacting business electronically. The finance minister says this is a program or policy that we are implementing, and so we have given a threshold of between 0 and 100 Ghana cedis where the folks within that bracket would not have to pay this 1.75. At the end of the month, it's expected that some 3,000 Ghana cedis would have been the threshold within which one must fall in order to enjoy that benefit. Now, he says that there are road projects to be done. Entrepreneurs, young ones, startups who ought to be supported, and that money has to come from the E-Levy. The Agenda 111 and several other promises that government intends to embark upon all has to come from that money. And so we switch our lenses back to Parliament and what happened there. Why are parliamentarians not being able to come to a consensus about the matter of the 1.75? The minority says they would have nothing to do with that 1.75, and all they are saying is that there should be no E-Levy at all, considering that Ghanaians are already burdened. High prices, fuel prices high, goods, and services prices also very high. And so government cannot burden the people of Ghana with that. There have been several civil society organizations who have also made proposals to government, some suggesting that government must be thinking between 0.5 and 0.75. And institutions, credible ones like ISE, have made these proposals. Just yesterday, the mobile money agents also threatened to go on strike on the 23rd if government pushes through with this E-Levy bill that it wants to pass into, an act. And so tonight we'll try to understand all these happenings and what the implications are for us if we are not able to agree on that 1.75. Some concessions obviously would have to be made, but would it be from the minority or would it be from the majority? There are issues to do with fears and concerns about, our political structure. The tug of war between the executive and then the legislature, where the minority are saying that this time around we will stand our grounds. There are those who are blaming the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament that his actions do not inure to the benefit of the generality of Ghanaians who attempt to understand all of that. But some statistics is important if we're talking about the E-Levy. And so I'll just share a few with our viewers and our listeners so we understand how important the mobile money space is to this, E-Levy project we're embarking on. Now, as of January 2021, 38.9% of the Ghanaian population aged between 15 years and older had a mobile money account in Ghana. Now, the share of mobile money users increased over the previous 3 years, but decreased slightly in 2021 from 39% in 2020. And so it gives you a breakdown. So from around 2018, the share of mobile money was around 13%. Around 2019, it shot up to somewhere around 39%. It remained same in 2020, and now it's around 38.9%. And so these are some figures that we can play around with. But if you check statistics that is available, around 2019, you'd realize that we had about 180,000 Momo agents in the country. Yeah, 180,000 Momo agents in the country. Obviously, 2021, the number would have increased. But we are looking at an industry that is able to transact business to the tune of about 569 billion Ghana cedis in 2020 alone. And this is information from the Bank of Ghana. So, how do we approach this? We'll try to seek the views of an economist and someone who understands the parliamentary proceedings so as to know the way forward a parliament should sit on this matter again. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet. Do stay with us.
The second deputy speaker to take the chair.
And you're welcome back to Fact Sheets Live on ETV, live on Facebook as well. The handle is ETV Ghana. Would like to hear your thoughts, your views on the happenings in Parliament, the ramifications for us as a nation if we are not able to go through with this E-Levy, where government intends to raise money through the 1.75% tax on electronic transactions. And so if you go to Facebook, you look for us and then you send your comments to us. We'll be grateful when you join us with these thoughts and views as well. And so we come back to have the conversation. The issues about parliamentary proceedings, the issues about processes within Parliament, the issues about the absence of the Speaker of Parliament at the time an important matter as that of the E-Levy was being tabled. The issue about the conduct of the First Deputy Speaker, who had to sit in as the Speaker of Parliament, and his decision to count himself firstly as a Member of Parliament and then also to cast a vote. You remember the issue about the earlier decision to count himself as a Member of Parliament and the brouhaha that generated. And so tonight we'll try to get an appreciation of whether parliamentary rules, parliamentary procedures are being followed. And the question about whether the members of Parliament who were seen on live television fighting, assaulting each other, whether the law must take its course and whether government or Parliament must take punitive actions against its own when they misconduct themselves. And so tonight, that's where we're beginning the conversation from before we jump into the areas of the economy. I'm joined this evening on the line by Dr. Rashid Dramani, who is Executive Director for Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, ASEPA, as he shares his thoughts with us tonight. Good evening, Doc, and thanks so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening, Doc.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Hello, good evening, Doc.
Yes, good evening.
All right, it looks like there's a little challenge with the line.
Good evening.
Doc, but we'll
Can
try
you hear
and
me?
establish contact with him and then continue with the conversation. If you just join us, you're welcome. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV. Let me try the phone lines again. Doc, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, I am well. Thank you.
All right, so let me take your expert view on the happenings in Parliament after the reading of the budget till now, when we have seen brawl on the floor of Parliament throughout the process after the reading of the budget. What are the few things you have noticed in Parliament as to the ability and willingness to make some concessions for, government business to proceed?
Well, I think what we have witnessed since the beginning of the budget process is a situation where the two sides of the House have taken very entrenched positions. We have seen at play what I would call a kind of zero-sum approach to this important national issue. We haven't seen a lot of, if you like, win-win attitude Uh, both sides were very, very kind of, if you like, firm on their position, particularly on the most important issue in the budget, which is the E-Levy. I mean, we hear the minority say is zero and nothing more than that. We hear the majority say is 1.5 or 1.75 and nothing more than that. At the end of the day, one would have thought that, with all the discussions that have gone on in the negotiations, we would have seen both sides move a little bit so that at least they can converge in the middle. But we haven't seen anything like that happening. And I don't know where to apportion the blame or if there's any blame at all. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, I think the two sides carry that burden of the fact that we've not been able to see a way clear out of the gridlock around the E-Levy, and I mean the resultant, if you like, unsightly scenes that we saw yesterday at night on the floor of the House.
It's interesting your choice of words. You describe the situation as a gridlock. Have you had time to process what could account for this gridlock that's gone on between the two sides?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of thinking. First of all, maybe let's look at the immediate events, the absence of the Right Honorable Speaker. This is someone who came from medical leave recently. And when he came, if you remember, there was a lot of expectation about what he was going to do the day he stepped into the House. There were even some that thought that he was coming to undo some of what was done in his absence. If you like, return fire for fire. But, the Right Honorable Speaker was very magnanimous in his approach, because I believe he read the mood of the nation and realized that, look, this is not the time to go and start undoing some of these things. That would have created more tension in the country. So if you listen to his speech, he said, look, he gave all the reasons why what happened was wrong, but he said he was more interested in the way forward. And so, I felt that he played a very important role in calming tensions and reducing the political temperature. But I was very surprised in the midst of all this. During the MPP Congress in Kumasi, I heard some of the leaders chastising him for issues that were really not necessary. Things, I don't know whether you follow some of that. I have read some that have said that he was being chastised for saying that there's no majority and so on and so forth. I mean, even if he did say that, I was thinking that at this time that we are trying to bring the country together and so on, these were not kind of commentary that would help the situation. So that is the immediate. Now, if you look at the relationship between the minority side and the majority side, right from day one, that's from January 7, many people have said that it was very important, given the character of this parliament, to make sure that we started on earnest trying to build consensus and making sure that the process of building consensus is not just a one-off event, because seeing the character of the parliament, seeing how it started on January 7, gridlock was to be expected, and all kinds of challenges were to be expected. And we are seeing them play out now. And the only way that some of this could have been abated, I mean, most of us said, was look, dialogue, and consensus. But it looks like either we haven't seen enough of that, or maybe the two sides were not sincere anytime they sit around the table to dialogue, or as some people have said, they don't have a lot of free hand to negotiate and to go and sit around the table and make certain commitments. So this is where we find ourselves right now, and I just hope that the respite that this adjournment is going to give, they will take advantage of it and do a lot of work behind the scenes, so that when they come back, hopefully, maybe the tensions would have died down completely, and then we can reset the relationship, and hopefully they can continue to work together to advance the agenda of this country.
About the point you made about the Speaker of Parliament that you feel should not have been made when the NPP went for their conference in Kumasi, there are those who hold the view that the conduct of the Speaker is that of he being partisan and leaning towards his party, the NDC. Do you see that?
Having carefully watched Parliament over the years, I've not seen any speaker that has not been accused by the other side for being partisan. Speaker Okwe was accused by the NDC many times. Speaker Jaho was accused by the MPP many times, and so on and so forth. We can continue to go on and on and on. Maybe the reason why this is becoming too prominent is just simply because of the tight numbers that we have in Parliament right now, and then also because the Speaker is not from the party that is in government. Otherwise, I think it's normal to hear these accusations, and I've heard them over and over and over. I mean, if you ask me, I don't think Speaker Bagwin is being overly partisan. I don't think so, because this is one speaker whose rulings have been challenged more than any other speaker in the Fourth Republic, to the extent that even one of his rulings was overturned. We've never seen a speaker in this country whose ruling was overturned by his deputy. But that has happened in this parliament with Speaker Babwin. But I think when he came back, he took that in his stride, and so for me, those who say he's excessively partisan, well, maybe that perception is there from those who don't belong to his side. But on the face of it, really, I mean, it could be there, but I mean, I am not able to, say that, he's overly partisan.
Now, the entrenched position taken by both parties, the minority says zero E-Levy. The majority says 1.75, regardless of what civil society organizations have been saying. Some making proposals 0.5, others say 1, others say 0.75, and so on. What concessions do you think should be made before an amicable resolution of this matter can be arrived at?
Well, my brother, when the Right Honorable Speaker came back from his medical absence, the speech that he made on the floor of Parliament, he offered a window of opportunity for both sides when he said, look, there are concessions and so on that have been made. the Minister for Finance was going to come back to the House with those details in the new document. But most importantly, the E-Levy bill is going to be laid before the House and then referred to the committee and so on. So I was thinking that, and then, I mean, the kind of expectation was that now the committee responsible for finance was going to engage stakeholders, was going to engage civil society and ordinary Ghanaians who have an interest or any kind of expertise to offer in terms of, I mean, the normal process of making a bill better. But all of a sudden we heard that this bill was, going to be taken through a kind of the process of urgency. Rather than just a normal process. And in fact, yesterday that was what caused the chaos. The discussion in terms of whether it should be even considered under the certificate of urgency rather than the normal. So I would have thought that if it was the normal kind of process that a bill travels in its life, through the processes of Parliament, that would have offered a lot of opportunity for both sides to save face. Because what would it do if stakeholders from the telcos, civil society organizations, and other individuals who have anything to say about the bill, if they go and make their presentation before the committee, I am sure that the bill was not going to come out the way it went to the committee. Definitely, there were going to be some amendments, particularly in terms of the rate and so on. And the committee would have come back to say, look, based on what we heard from a cross-section of Ghanaians, the experts in the field and so on, this is, what we recommend. That would have, I believe, been a perfect opportunity for the NDC to say, okay, we can soften our stance now. And the government side could also say, yes, I think we can also soften our stance now. So I think if I'm to advise the leaders, maybe this might just be the only way that we can get out of this, particularly keeping in mind that both sides have to be ready, at least to shift a little bit from their current entrenched positions. Because as they say, if you find yourself in a hole, the last thing you want to do is to continue to dig. You have to find a way to come out of that hole. And I think that that's a situation where both parties find themselves in right now. They are in a very deep hole, and they have to find a way to get out of that hole. And if the bill benefits from the contribution of cross-section of Ghanaians, maybe that might help them to climb up and save face, and then maybe we can make some progress.
But the point about concessions, would one not be fair to say that if you remember, the minority laid down 5 issues that they believed the executive must take a look at before, if any concessions can be arrived at, it would be arrived at. And of these, I think about 4 of these concessions have been acceded by the finance minister. And so one would say that it's now time for, the minority to also make a concession for this matter of the E-Levy. Would that not be right?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. In fact, I was on a program with an NDC MP over the weekend, and I put that question to him, that if you say you got 4 of the reliefs that you were asking for, wouldn't you be unfair not to budge on this issue of the E-Levy? And he said, well, the E-Levy was the most important issue for them. So true, I think the government side, the majority side, has made a lot of concessions. I believe it's time the NDC also took a very careful look at the kind of demand that they are making on this E-Levy.
In this regard,
to say zero, well, I think it's a bit of a stretch.
In this regard, what would that move be for the NDC in terms of making a concession?
What would what?
What would that move be in terms of also making a concession by the NDC?
Well, I think yes. I think the move, because yesterday, I mean, even before the vote was taken, I heard their leaders saying all the 137 members are going to vote no, completely no. I don't know whether if, for instance, there was a reduction in the percentage, because at the beginning of the negotiations, I heard some talk about, maybe the percentage has to be reduced, or the threshold of the daily amount of 100 maybe increased to about 200 or 300 and that kind of thing. Whatever it is, I think maybe they should come out and tell Ghanaians what percentage that they can tolerate, and then maybe that can constitute the subject of discussion. I mean, that is if we don't go via this channel of the committee looking at the bill and subjecting it to a thorough kind of contribution from Ghanaians.
But gauging the mood of Ghanaians, using, for instance, the benchmark of the position of civil society organizations, even the mobile money agents themselves who intend to embark on a strike on the 23rd, would the NDC's decision to make a concession not amount to a betrayal of the trust of the people in terms of the hardships they are already dealing with?
Well, maybe that's what is making them not to concede. I don't know. I'm not in their party, so I cannot speak for them. But I believe that if indeed that's the case, the question to the MPP is that have they also tried to gauge the mood of Ghanaians? Because it's very important that, even though we need the resources as a country, knowing how people feel about this is also very important for immediate kind of decision making, but also for the future fortunes of the MPP. Because look, it could be the case that they could go ahead with this 1.75%, and people can decide to protest with their money and say, look, we are not going to do mobile money again. And then, first of all, you would have broken the trust that you have with the people, and then you would also have lost the revenue that you could have gained if there was a win-win kind of situation where you shifted your stand in terms of reducing the percentage. So there are a lot of variables here that both sides would need to keep in mind. But most importantly, the MPP side, the governing party side, because at the end of the day, they have the mandate to govern this country, and they are going to be assessed. Because when we go to the polls, it's going to be a referendum on the performance of the MPP, both in government and in parliament. It's not going to be, a referendum on the performance of the NDC. It's going to be more a referendum on the performance of the party that governed the country for a 4-year period. So that's why I think there are a lot of factors that they need to keep in mind as these negotiations unfold and as the deliberations take place in the coming days.
My final question before we end the conversation, Doc, that has to do with what we experience in a regular corporate setup where people are involved in a fight. Sometimes it leads to suspension. Sometimes it leads to the firing of that individual from that job. And so we ask, should these members of parliament we have seen fighting in parliament just go scot-free, or parliament must take steps to ensure these members of parliament are punished?
Yes, I think certainly anybody who is involved in any unruly behavior, every institution has its disciplinary kind of processes and procedures. But if you remember, we're all in this country on the 7th of January when ballots were snatched, ballots were eaten, MPs took ballots and they were running away and all those things. The military entered parliament. Did you hear anything happen to anybody?
Mm. I didn't.
So I think, yeah, I mean, it's a failure on the part of the institution itself. So if we are going to be, I mean, saying that we have to deal with this, I remember after the January 7 event, I mean, parliaments, we are going to investigate this and make sure that people are punished and so on. Nothing happened, and yesterday we saw a repeat. So I think they need to take a careful look at this and make sure that they go back to January 7. You know, the military, they have some questions to answer. Whoever ordered them into parliament, the person has questions to answer. Those who snatched ballots, those who kicked ballot boxes, all of them, I think, have questions to answer. And then we come to this one of yesterday.
Doc, I'm grateful that you made time to speak to us tonight on ETV's fact sheet. I'm hoping that before we wrap up our conversation, we'll also take a wrap-up comment from you. But if you just joined the show this evening, you're welcome to Fact Sheet Live on ETV. My name is Samuel Ishem, and we're discussing the happenings in Parliament, the brawl that happened in Parliament, the issue of the E-Levy, whether people ought to be sanctioned, whether it's the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, Alban Babin, who is being partisan, that is gotten us here. There are those who also make the case that it's as a result of the moves by the majority in Parliament to undermine the authority of the Speaker of Parliament. That's making the minority in Parliament behave the way they are behaving towards them. And so how to reach a consensus is the matter of concern for all of us. So what will happen if the 1.75 E-Levy is not passed? What would be the impact on government's projected, policy programs that it intends to embark on? And so these are the issues we are taking a look at tonight if you just join us. I'm grateful that you tune in. I am encouraging you to send your thoughts, your views, and your comments to us. Our WhatsApp line is 02022222054. But on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well, you can follow the conversation and let your thoughts be heard as well. And let me just go through a few text messages that have gotten through tonight via Facebook and share it with our viewers. So, okay, let me start from WhatsApp and share a few comments with our viewers. So, this one says, Sammy, I am following the conversation and I'm enjoying the point that your guest is making. It's about time, punitive actions are taken against these members of parliament. They are supposed to be role models and so cannot be allowed to behave the way they are behaving. And that's from Evelyn joining us on our WhatsApp line 02022222054. Now, this one from Kisiedu says, Sammy, the point has to be made that the minority have taken this intransigent position because of the way the majority are misconducting themselves towards the Speaker of Parliament. They are at every point trying to undermine the Speaker. And so obviously you'll find the NDC taking this position. Thank you very much for your view expressed there. You can also join us via WhatsApp line 02022222054. We're going for a short breather in a bit, but let me read these two text messages and then we can go for that breather. And so this one from I'm hoping that Zakaria Abunabi, I hope I got the pronunciation of your name right. He says that following the conversation and what happened on the floor of Parliament, I felt so sad for our nation, Ghana. Indeed, these are supposed to be honorable members of Parliament. The August House of Parliament has become nothing to write home about. I feel so ashamed as a Ghanaian. And then finally, I'll read this one from Richard Aheto. Richard says, seeing what I saw yesterday, I have lost hope for my nation, Ghana. If members of Parliament can behave this way, then we can only consider them as children. These are your views that you're sharing with us this evening live on fact sheet. So let me speak to Emmanuel Amwa Dakwa, economist and partner at CCAT Global, and pick his thoughts on the issues therein. Emma, good evening, and it's good to have you on the show tonight.
Good evening, Sammy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking about that. I hope you're doing well as well.
I'm also amazing.
My first question would be what it would mean if we are not able to arrive at a consensus on this 1.75 E-Levy that government intends to impose. If it's reduced to 0.5, if it's reduced to 1%, what would it mean for government's projected plans?
Thank you very much, and very good evening to our viewers. Government has made projections at the back of this 1.5%. And so when you are doing the budget, there are two major components. You look at your revenue and you look at your expenditure. And then your revenue, based on your revenue, expenditure. And so for this 2022, government expects that they're going to raise about 100 billion. Key of the revenue measures is that E-Levy. That is where government is projecting to raise about or close to 7 billion Ghana cedis. So based on that, you also make your expenditure projection. For 2022, government envisaged spend about 137 billion. And so this week, it means that government envisaged revenue will go down. And if it goes down, it means that expenditure, all things equal, government able to reduce it so that you because your revenue and expenditure, we are looking at about 37 billion in terms of budget deficit for 2022. And so should the rate be reduced, government will have to reduce the expenditure in that line. Otherwise, the budget deficit for 2022 will balloon, which will also affect the public debt, which is also going up. And it's a recipe for disaster going into the medium term.
So I'm trying to think like an ordinary Ghanaian. So if you have 100 billion projected to spend and 7 billion is taken out of it, or you have 137 billion as your projected expenditure plan, and you are making some, let's say, 93 million. Why then does government not cut its coat according to its size?
That's how our budgets have been over the years. We've been running budget deficits for a number of years now, and it's not the best, but deficit in itself is not bad, but what do you use the deficit for? And so if you look at all budgets, you read that expenditure will exceed revenue, but there should be a gap to get that, revenue shortfall. And that is where you will see that there is going to be a budget deficit, and the budget will state how the budget deficit will be financed, whether domestically or externally. Whether it is financed domestically or externally, it has disadvantages. When it is financed domestically, what it means is that you are going to crowd out the private sector for credit. When it is secured externally, you're also going to incur some high interest rate commercial loans from international capital markets. And so that is what has been our bane. But unfortunately, if you look at the expenditure allocations, interest payments for the second year running is leading the expenditure allocations, followed by compensation to government employees. What it means is that we are spending to consume, and these are not going into very capital expenditure items. Capital expenditure for 2022 is around 16 billion as compared to 37 billion which has been allocated for interest payments. So it means that looking at the allocations, there's something wrong with how we are managing our fiscals.
Now, there's a point that someone made this morning that if, from what we have heard some government communicators say, that if we are not able to implement or tax this 1.75%, would have no option than to go to the IMF. Is that bad?
It depends on the kind of program that government wants to go for. If government will want to go to the IMF, the IMF has three major functions. One, they have what we call surveillance. So surveillance is periodically they will look at your books and say that you are doing this right, you are doing this wrong, so you have to amend this portion. The second one is on technical advice. Let's say you want to draft a bill. Because of the experience in many countries, they can also help you. And the third is funded program. And that is when we mention IMF, people are get scared of it because of our experience with the IMF and the World Bank, especially in 1983 when we went for the structure adjustment program. And even recently between 2015 and 2019 when we went for the extended credit facility. I believe that the problem is the same. If I look at the challenges that took us to the IMF in the 1960s and then comparing it to the recent one in 2015, basically the same. The structure of the economy has not changed. Import-dependent economy, budget, balance of payments is also not doing well. Your public debt is rising. Your inflation is rising. So we have not solved our problems over the years. So you can go to the IMF. We exited an IMF program in just 2019. And we are in 2020, we are talking about an IMF program again. It means that we have not solved our problem, and we have to solve our problem if we want to avoid going to the IMF for a funded program.
Now, we are told that we have some 39% of the Ghanaian population who are using mobile money. Now, what would be the impact on that otherwise fragile platform if government goes ahead to implement 1.75%?
Possibly, I envisage that the volumes of transactions traded on Momo platform in the short term might go down. And then periodically it might inch up or get to the momentum it was maybe in the medium term if something changes, especially in terms of the rates that are being charged. And so based on government's own, research, government says that the people who trade around or transact around 100 CDs in a day are about 40% of the people who use Momo platform. I believe that should this be implemented in the first year, we are likely to see a dip in the volumes of transaction in mobile money. When there's a dip in the volumes of transactions, government's projection in terms of raising about 6.9 billion will not be realized. And so we have to look at the expenditure as well, because if you're not meeting your revenue, you also have to cut your expenditure, which also has repercussions for, the expansionary economic model that government would want to employ in the coming year.
Now, I have been trying to, answer this for myself as to whether the Momo platforms are that essential that its absence in terms of its usage can affect the economy. After all, if I decide not to transact a business of 200 Ghana cedis via Momo, and I take transport, let's say Trotro from East Legon to deliver 200 Ghana cedis to somebody at, let's say, Accra Central, it is the transport guy who is making some money, not so.
Well, Momo has created convenience, and also in terms of security. If you are transporting that 200 Ghana cedis and maybe armed robbers attack you on the road, you are going to lose your money. And so, mobile money has over the years been part of us in terms of how it has made transactions very easy, and people are very comfortable trading or making transactions on mobile money. And so, I envisage that should we implement this 1.75 in the first year, the volumes on mobile money transactions might reduce. If it reduces, it means that the envisaged revenue will not be able to get. And we also, as a country, gearing towards what we call a cash-like society, whereby we want to use digital platforms to make payments. So mobile money is one avenue that we are able to achieve that goal of getting into a cash-like economy. And so should this platform be slapped with a lot of charges, people will not be comfortable to trade on that platform.
That fear of the dwindling numbers, if we go ahead and impose the 1.75, that fear, is it real?
It is very real. It is very real because I have been speaking to a lot of people who have been trading or making transactions on Momo, and all that they are telling me is that when they have to make payment, they will have to wait, and then they will have to deliver the cash in person. It's not the best, but I believe that it is real. A lot of people might want to backtrack on using Momo platform and maybe use other alternative, which might be maybe risky, maybe not convenient, but maybe if something is done about that rate, that people will be able to come back on the platform.
Now, I remember the last conversation we had in the studio. You're making a point about the circulation of money locally. And
Yeah.
in that respect, I'm thinking about the 23rd December strike that the mobile money agent operators intend to embark on. Would it really impact on the economy if they embark on that, strike? Apart from the issues about convenience you spoke about, would it really impact on the economy?
Well, its impact will be measured against the volumes of transactions made every day. Because when we are transacting on mobile money platforms, the telcos are making money. And it also makes life convenient for us. And so, should this come on, it means that the profit that the merchants will be making in the first place, they will not be able to get it. And let's also get it in mind that the merchants, they are doing business to make money. They will not be able to get that money to make ends meet. Again, the corporations that are providing the platform, i.e. the MTN, Vodafone, Airtel, Tigo, they will not be able to get the spread that they will look for in that day. And so it is definitely going to affect the economy should they go on strike.
Final question is the capacity for, the mobile money business to affect the banking sector. If, for instance, these operators put out their tools and people panic and decide to withdraw their money from all the mobile money vendors or money they have on their phones, is there a potential that would affect the banking sector where these agents keep their money? After all, they will be compelled to withdraw these monies for their customers who will be coming to withdraw.
Well, let me not be alarmist because these are very crucial issues when we talk about panic withdrawals. These are early days, and I've not been able to get numbers to crunch on to say that it's going to be an alarm and it's going to lead to panic withdrawals. But my initial comment will be, you see, these mobile money agents, they also have accounts that are domiciled with the banks. And so I envisage that should they also, try to get their money from some volumes, but I wouldn't want to sound alarmist, but these are early days here, but we're yet to see the impact. I don't want to sound alarmist, so that to say categorically that people are going into for panic withdrawals. That I wouldn't want to make that point.
Final one has to do with all these ideas that you and I am not an economist, I am not a finance person, you are. All these ideas that you're throwing at us, all these concerns that you're throwing at us, have these simulations not have been, would they not have been done by the finance ministry as to the likely impact this is going to have on the economy and the counter effect it will have in terms of its revenue generation drive?
Possibly, because for the Ministry of Finance, a consultant was employed to have, a proper research done in taxing mobile money and its impact. We have not seen the full report yet, so I won't be able to speak to the details of the report, but possibly there will be in the report that there are going to be negative repercussions when 1.75% is slapped on mobile money. And not only mobile money, but E-Levy in general, because it has three legs. It's also on remittances, and it's also on those who trade with POS and QR code and all that. So possibly the research will indicate that there will be some repercussions on Ghana's economy should government go ahead to implement the 1.75 E-Levy.
Well, Ima, I thank you for making time to join us this evening. But final one, I know yours is not about politics. I know yours is not about parliamentary issues. But your view on what happened in Parliament, how did you feel watching that on TV?
It's so unfortunate. You know, it's all about interpretation of the law. And so, to the minority, when Joe Wise goes to vote, it will be against the law. And so, they have to prevent it. And this led to this scuffle. I think, in terms of the broader discussion, consultations are very important. Government wants to come out with a policy. In some countries, when government wants to come out with such a major policy, government will issue a white paper and also receive concerns from stakeholders. And so, specifically talking about E-Levy, and government wants to issue taxation on E-Levy, government would have issued a white paper and then gotten concerns from the telcos, from the merchants, from local, users of the platform, and so which will inform government's decision, because this has led to that stiff position by the minority to say that you have to reduce. But government has also made projections based on that. If government does not get this 6.9 billion, it's going to be very difficult next year. And so we shouldn't be able to, going into the future, we should be able to consult more so that we avoid such scuffles.
I'm grateful. You join me tonight, Ima.
Thank you very much, Sam.
And that's Emmanuel Amwadakwa, who is economist and partner at CCAT Global. We're also joined on the line this evening by Dr. Rashid Dramani, who is Executive Director for the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, joining us tonight. I'd like to thank you for being a part of tonight's edition of Fact Sheet Live on ETV. Several text messages. Unfortunately, we don't have time, and so I wish you a blessed evening. Girl Vibes is up next.